Sorry. I call this regular Medicine Hat City Council meeting of January 6, 2025 to order at 6:30 p.m. And we will begin with a moment for prayer or reflection. The City of Medicine Hat acknowledges that we live and work on treaty territory. The city pays respects to all Indigenous peoples and honors their past, present, and future. We recognize and respect their cultural heritages and relationships to the land. Item 5.1, regular council meeting minutes of December 16th, 2024. Are there any objections, errors, omissions? Seeing none, we will adopt the minutes. Council adopts the minutes of December 16th, 2024, regular council meeting as presented. Adoption of the agenda. Does anyone have any items they would like to add to the agenda? Councillor Sharps?
I have a notice of motion, Mayor Clark.
Okay, thank you. That will occur in item 12.1.
Okay.
I guess we have to accept it. So we will vote on the agenda as amended. My apologies. So Councillor Sharps would like to add that. It's just back from holidays. So we'll need a seconder.
I'll second.
And now we'll vote on her motion to add a notice of motion. All right, and that's unanimous. Any other additions or amendments? Seeing none, we'll adopt the agenda of the January 6, 2025 regular City Council meeting as amended. Are there any councillor announcements? Oh, Councillor Dumanowski.
Your Worship, if I could take a moment to reflect on former Councillor Les Pearson. Over the holidays, we're all saddened to hear the news that we lost our former City Council member, Les Pearson, who passed away on December 26, 2024 at St. Joseph's Hospice at the age of 78. Les was born in Regina, Saskatchewan and raised in Cardiff, Saskatchewan. He became a teacher and he taught in many schools over the years. His teaching career eventually brought him to Medicine Hat in 1996, where he was appointed the first principal of Eagle Butte High School. Les became very involved in the community, including serving on City Council from 2010 to 2017 as alderman, as we were referred to at that time. During his 2 terms as alderman, he represented council on several boards and committees, including Shortgrass Library System, Medicine Hat Public Library, Medicine Hat Community Housing Society, Tourism Medicine Hat, Heritage Resources Committee, and the Regional Drainage Committee. I had the pleasure of serving with Mr. Pearson during that time and got to know him quite well. He was very socially conscious, and every decision that he made certainly had the welfare of everyday citizens in mind. He was very articulate and expressive, and he had a great sense of humor and quite an affable gentleman. And he was very professional and thoughtful, always considering the depth of every decision before rendering his view. Outside of his work on council, Les Pearson was very involved with his church as well as several other community organizations. He's very proud of his work to bring hospice care to Medicine Hat at St. Joseph's and his role as a founding member of the Folk Music Club here in Medicine Hat. Legacy is one of kindness, humor, and a visionary spirit that will continue to shape Medicine Hat for years to come. Those who had the privilege of knowing Les and working alongside him were inspired by his passion and generosity. Thanks to Les Pearson, our community is not only stronger, but richer in heart and hope. On behalf of City Council, I wish to extend heartfelt condolences to Les's wife, Colleen Pearson, as well as his stepchildren, step-grandchildren, his sister, and all of his family members and friends. There will be a service at Victory Lutheran Church tomorrow at 2 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those kind words, Councillor Dumanowski. I think we can all just hope that we have lives as rich as that and contribute so much. Thank you very much for sharing that. We'll now move on to our consent agenda. Does anyone have anything they would like to pull from the consent agenda for discussion? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion?
I move that council adopts the consent agenda items as presented.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you. We'll vote on the motion. That's unanimous. Unfinished business, not, item 9, budget amendment.
And I'm sure staff would appreciate and will appreciate if we support this, that the changes being, is based on examples where there are decisions that need to be made, which inherently aren't precluded from staff being able to make them, but awkwardly have rendered themselves in a situation where they've had to bring back an amendment of some sort because they exceeded a budget limitation or otherwise. And so in this regard, this largely puts us, as I understand it, in alignment with most communities, and certainly with our uniqueness in our energy business unit, it makes us even more, it makes it more necessary for us to amend our policy. So I'm happy to support it today.
Okay. I have Councillor McGrogan. I would like to note that my preference is that the reporting be more frequently than annual. I think that's important for our due diligence and awareness of where we're at with the budget. Councillor McGrogan.
Yeah, thank you. And through the chair, just a couple of thoughts. I think there's been at least 2 times that this council has sat where there's been some major repairs required at utilities that basically we approved after the fact. So I take it that's the one thing that we're trying to correct and get in front of. I just wanted some clarity on the, if I could, city manager or whoever might answer this. It says that a significant, it's the 3rd bullet on the briefing notice, is a change in funding source, third-party debt and reserves. So just as they were 2 examples, so could someone just explain what the change is, or if that's where it would come from anyway, would it not?
So just to clarify, you're on page 52.
Sorry.
And it's
46.
Sorry. I'm just hoping to find it here. I clicked on it. Okay, thank you.
All right, through the chair to Councillor McGrogan, these are just examples of when we believe budget amendments would come to council. The specific one that you had mentioned, a change in funding source, and there's various funding sources that we could use: working capital, reserves, debt, could be grant funded from the province. Any change in those, especially where it requires council approval, would need to come back here for their approval, for your approval.
Thank you. I have a question about reserves, but I'll save it for the next item.
Okay, Councillor Sharps.
I may be asking your question, I'm not sure. Actually, when I read this, and one of the things that came up through the budget process, through the chair, was we talked about reserves a lot. Maybe if we could just clarify how the reserves come to be and how they get funded, because I know that there was some confusion with that and in the public. And so when I look at this, and I have to agree with Mayor Clark here, I think this is probably a really good policy so people can get their work done. But I think that if we leave it for an annual report, it may get lost in the transparency of the funding. So that's just my thought. I'd like to see that as well. But if we could just talk about reserves and how reserves gets funded.
Thank you, through the chair. And just to your point, Councillor Sharps, and then I'll turn it over to Managing Director Egert. Reserves are always created by council. They have to be laid out by council and approved by council. And any movement of funds has to be brought to council and presented to council. But as to the specific of how the money goes in and out, I'll turn that over to Managing Director.
Okay, and I may have a follow-up, so.
Yeah, through the chair, that was a very good summary. We currently have a financial reserve policy that lays out exactly what reserves council has approved, how they're being funded, and where the funds can be used.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could say out loud what that policy was and kind of explain it to the people that are listening and trying to understand where our funds come from.
So through the chair, the funds, the majority of the funds do come from our business units. So that would either be from our land business, from our utility business, or from the electric generation business. We also receive money from the government that we need to use to fund capital projects that we would hold until spent. And so we need to hold those aside until they're spent. And the other source of funding would be if in any year we have a municipal surplus. That municipal surplus then would go into the reserves.
Thank you. I think that's where my question is. I'm going to let Councillor McGrogan go, and I'll just formulate my thoughts here.
Okay, I thought you were saving, are you wanting to do it
We've
this
already-
time? Okay,
we opened the
Councillor
bag, so
McGrogan.
Thank you very much, through the chair. So I guess that's kind of where I was just going to head with this, and I think it's clarity for the community in relation. The last thing you twigged on was municipal, if we have, I guess, a surplus in our municipal side, and that was my past experiences, that it would be put into the reserve. So is that, I guess I'm asking, is that so? So for instance, if we had a $3 million, I guess, have we had more than we'd spent by, let's say, 3 million, I'm just going to use the number, does it mostly go into reserve? So basically, we do a tax increase of X number of percent. We go through our year, we do business, it's always good when we have money left over. Does that money normally just go into reserve? And yeah, that's my question.
So through the chair, Councillor McGrogan, a little bit of background. So we do set the tax revenue requirement for the year, and council at the last meeting approved what that tax revenue requirement will be for 2025 and 2026. So throughout the year, some taxpayers would actually pay in installments. Some would be paying on June 28th. At the end of the year, at the end of the calendar year, if we do have a surplus, we don't spend it, but rather we put it aside in our savings account, if you will. And if we need it in future years for a deficit, for example, we could potentially use that, provided council approves that.
Thank you. So just a follow-up. So let's use the last tax year and say in 2024, when will we report whether we had a surplus and whether it was put in reserve or not, and the amount that it would be? Is it during the triannual audit report, or when would it be?
Yeah, through the chair, and that's exactly right, Councillor McGrogan. So the first audit committee meeting in 2025 is where KPMG would report out on the annual financial statements. And that's exactly when we will know exactly what that either surplus or deficit will be on the municipal side.
Thank you.
Councillor Hirsch.
I just might weigh in on this as just as, maybe as chair of audit, but as a person that's kind of went through the process. So I think maybe the question's more in regards to, we talked about this ambiguous reserve, but I think it's helpful for maybe the viewing public and maybe managing director, you can explain, infrastructure reserve, abandonment reserve, like, you know, we talked at budget, we talked about the fact that a fire truck is now 60% more expensive than it was in, well, whatever the number was, 2019. So I think for the viewing public, it's just not like it goes into a vast vault of riches. There's actually reserve funds, which means for the future. So when we talk about, you know, the abandonment process for our oil and gas division, it's a big dollar. So those reserve and funds, by virtue of the province of Alberta directing us that we have to have that money available for abandonment. The reserve and infrastructure reserve that we have for future either streets or sidewalks, or everyone experienced the work that was done downtown in terms of all the pipe replacements. That's kind of what those dollars are meant for, except they're not, they have to be collected, they have to be stored somewhere in accounts until they're utilized. So there is, and I mean, the fact that there's some need clarity maybe behind it, when we do have our next triennial, I think we'll make an effort to certainly bring back some of those items and speak to each specific reserve and what they're meant for, so.
In response.
In response to
Okay.
Councillor Hirsch, I think that's excellent, and I would appreciate that, and I think the community would love to hear, because, you know, we talk about our budget deliberations, we talk about taking taxpayers' money before we need it, and that would be a great explanation, I think, for our community here. So I don't know if we need some kind of a motion, or if we can just make notes and ensure that that information is passed on, and, you know, especially the tax side of the house and what have you not. So thank you.
So I am going to insist that we do motions, because I feel like some of the things we've talked about haven't necessarily been tracked, and I believe our city clerk is developing a motions tracking list, and so that way we can ensure that everything that we request is being tracked and responded to. But I'm gonna go to Councilor Dumanowski. Councilor Dumanowski.
Yeah, through the chair, good conversation, and certainly the questions are absolutely in line. I do note, though, as I hear it, and I'm imagining those who are viewing the meeting may have follow-up questions regarding, I think the inference was some over-collection of funds. I think as Managing Director has appropriately indicated there, that you set your budget, which is very transparent, very open process, and reported to the province and adjudicated, et cetera. But in the end, we don't have the luxury, nor do we want to fund a deficit budget like our provincial and federal counterparts. So we can't afford, nor can we put ourselves in a position of under-collecting, not to infer that we're automatically over-collecting. But the reality is, when we look at all these monies or any leftover funds perhaps at the end of the year, those will go in reserve. The whole idea is that they then offset any variance, or would offset the next subsequent budget process, and the same competing forces or different ones, and the same adjudication, same transparency. So it's kind of, it lends itself well, and out of necessity functions that way, but it's no different than our return to cost ratio of 1 that we often refer to for a couple of decades around this table in our utility side. You're always projecting what is our cost, distribution, production, generation, et cetera, servicing, and then you establish rates based on that, and in some years you may undercollect due to unforeseen variables or for a portion of the year, and their staff may come back for a recommended change or otherwise. But it's always a little bit of up and down game, but in the end, the budget lines, as has been indicated by the city manager, are set by council. I think the biggest challenge or misnomer is that we have these funds, we report the totality of them, and there's a lot of good questioning by and appropriate questioning by the public of what they account for. And I think that's something we will continue to, I don't want to say struggle to narrate, but I'll look at it affirmatively. We can do a better job, and we can certainly attempt to be more clear so that people understand why we have all these reserves and what their function is today and in the short term and the longer term. And the better understanding we have by the public and, you know, by all of us around the table, certainly the better we're all and position we're in the budget process, but also in our accounting of all those funds, which in the end is the taxpayers' dollars. So good conversation overall. I just thought I would add that.
Councillor Sharps.
Thank you. I just wanted to do a quick follow-up. So my question wasn't around a misunderstanding what a reserve was. I know what a reserve is. My question was about, and I think it'll come out in the audit, so I appreciate that. But if we, like for the last, we got a 5.6% increase, but let's say we only spend 3.5. The rest of that money now goes into reserves. So as a taxpayer, I'm like, oh, could we not do it later? Or what is the reasoning? So I get the reserves, I agree with reserves. I just don't know if I understand why we're not doing more zero-based budgeting versus taking that and put it in. So I think it's a good conversation and something we can do more in audit and bring back to the public as well. Because it was something that came out after the budget meetings with citizens. So it's a fair question, and they deserve an answer.
Managing Director Egert.
Okay, through the chair, and I do love the discussion, and we do have a bit of a timing difference here that we approve the budget in advance, and we don't know how much the spending is until the end of the year. I will give one example, though, that maybe the viewers can identify with is our snowfall budget, snow removal budget, and we just had a big snowfall here a few days ago. We budget on the best assumptions that we have based on weather patterns that we experienced in the past few years. We don't know if it's going to snow on the weekend. We don't know if it's going to snow during a stat holiday. We don't know if it's going to snow 3 or 4 times during a day. So that's one example of many where we make our best assumptions as to what the expense is going to be and the level of service. But when it snows, we need to remove the snow. Last year, towards the end of the year, we had a wonderful fall. It didn't snow as quickly as we thought it would. So some years for snowfall, we have less, and some years we have more. And that's one example of where you could maybe spend more money or spend less money, but you won't know that until the end of the year.
City Manager Mitchell.
Thank you, through the chair. And just to follow up on Managing Director Egert's point and Councillor Sharp's, I think it would be a good idea if council wanted to relook at the policy, but certainly having a greater understanding of the reserves. Councillor Hirsch mentioned this as well too. This year, council approved renaming different reserves so we know exactly what they are. So we certainly can bring that back and highlight it for the public so they could get a greater understanding.
All right, I don't see any more speakers, but I have suggested, I can't make a motion from the chair, but I have suggested a change to 5.4, which says currently under role of city manager, this is on page 50. 5.4 says report all budget transfers to council on an annual basis. I would at least suggest triannual, so that would be my suggested amendment. And then Councillor McGrogan suggested a sort of educational, is that fair? Educational seminar on our reserves. So is anyone going to make a motion?
I can make that motion.
Okay.
Do you need me to reword that? I think you did great. Can you just copy and paste? Because we're not live, so it doesn't really matter.
Oh,
We're not streaming.
I thought that got
We are
worked out.
streaming? Damn it. No, we
Okay.
weren't. We weren't, but we are now.
Okay, so we're good. Okay, so if you could just put it up on the screen. It's not the current policy. Yeah,
Sorry, Stephanie, that it should amend 5.4. of budget amendment policy. And instead of on an annual basis to I think triannual in line with the audit would be great.
Even in our tri-annual reports.
I like that. That would work. And I see managing director nodding, so I think that's agreeable.
Council requests to amend the item 5.4 of Budget Amendment Policy 0183 to read, report all budget transfers to council on a tri-annual basis including within our tri-annual report. I guess the would probably be better than our, I apologize. Doesn't everyone love typing while everyone's watching? And then council directs administration to prepare and present a educational presentation, again, I shouldn't have said present, but educational presentation on the city's reserves. Does that? Okay, reserves and reserve policies. Policies and bylaws, sorry, because there is a bylaw with respect to the Heritage Reserve, which I don't think we call it that anymore.
Could we just put educational
Endowment.
material, present educational material, then it doesn't dictate what it looks like?
Okay. So is that consistent with what you wanted to move, Councillor Sharps? Yes. Okay, can we get a seconder?
Oh, I can second that.
Thank you. Any debate or discussion? Councillor Dumanowski?
Yeah, through the chair, I certainly, I'm not opposed to increase understanding or clarity around this. My maybe short-sighted thought is that inevitably, if I can simplify and use a home budget as an example, you have certain predictors or some level of predictability around what your expenses will be monthly or extrapolated over a year's time, et cetera. But there's certainly going to be movement. My worry would be that additional clarity or the idea of creating additional clarity on this every 4 months could, in fact, have an underived relationship to creating more confusion, because there inevitably is going to be movement, as the city managing director said. There are means and ways monies are collected, and again based on a projection, et cetera, and so monies are moved within budget, but in the end, it's really, and from the standpoint of the MGA, we report at a year end, consistent with every other municipality. So I'm not opposed to it in principle. I just feel that its intended purpose may actually, in the shorter term, confuse the public. So I hope that's not the case. But I guess if it's fair, I wouldn't mind asking our staff, putting them on the spot, what are, I know we're the what and you're the how, but what are your, are there any concerns or considerations around moving from annual to triannual that serve as a challenge or a problem from the standpoint of administrative procedure or fairness or just process in general?
through the chair to Councillor Dumanowski, triennial would be doable. Audit committee then would see it more frequently, and the public and council. And then at year end, we would have a complete summary of the entire year.
Thank you. Just so that everyone is up to speed, the motion did read council request to amend. It should have said council amends. And then we've added an and at the end of the first clause so that we can do it as one motion. So we have a seconder debate. Councillor Hirsch.
I just want to reiterate, so not that it'll be Pandora's box, but I just want to give you an example what that might look like is actually there might be a transfer of money from reserves that you might see come to you awaiting a grant from the province of Alberta, for example, and they only fund on certain dates. So, and for example, we would do our construction in the summer, so that you might see kind of borrowing from Peter, waiting for Paul's money. So not to, again, I don't want this to, we do get this report, I go back to Councillor Dumanowski's and he made an excellent point saying, I don't want to add any confusion to this because in the wash, in the end, you can, it makes sense towards the end of the fiscal year versus mid-season when you're going, well, why did you take from reserves when that was supposed to be funded by, yeah, we are, but we don't get funded that money until 3 weeks later or something. So just keep an open mind. I think it's important to understand that. Thanks.
All right, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the amendment and direction. That's unanimous. So now the main motion is on the table. So it would be as amended. Any further questions or debate? Seeing none, we'll vote on the policy as amended. And that's unanimous. Moving on to item 11.1, Town Square Public Washrooms, and this is sponsored by Public Services Committee. The chair is Councillor Hyder, so I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, and through the chair. I move that council approves cancellation of a 2023 capital budget for construction of a washroom at Town Square.
I'll second.
Councillor Hyder, do you wish to provide some background on this one?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through our meetings and conversation in public service, we feel at this time that the bathrooms that are being utilized at the bus terminal seem to be more than adequate for any sort of usage for downtown. And that was well agreed with within our committee.
Councillor Robbins?
Yes, thank you, and through the chair. We did discuss this at some length at committee, but I did have a question that I didn't ask then, and I wish that I had. The cancellation of because it was going to be debt funding for $540,000. In the 2024-2025 budget, was the interest on that debt built into the budget? Or because this decision had been made, is it not included in the budget? Just curious.
Through the chair, Councillor Robbins, because we did not know yet it was to be canceled, we didn't reflect that difference in the budget that council approved in December.
So do we have any sense of what that cost savings might be? If you don't know, it's okay. I mean, I'm just maybe more curious than anything else, because it will change the budget, but not in a significant way. But it is a cost, it'll save money, and so I'd like to highlight that when I can.
It will save money. It'll save interest and principal repayment and operating cost of the washroom. I just don't know what that amount is.
Sure. Yeah, I think the operating cost is in the briefing note, so, but I was just curious about the interest saving over time, but I can follow up at another time about that. I should have asked it at committee is what I should have done, but.
Councillor Van Dyke?
Yes, thank you through the chair. So I appreciate this report to council and the work that was done by administration originally to find a solution to the need for more bathrooms in the downtown and extending the hours and security at the transit terminal. If we had continued on with the C-cans and additional programming at the town square, I would have wanted to see additional bathrooms there for those events, but seeing as we've moved away from that direction, I think that this is probably the best, most prudent way forward financially. And I do think that it's good to highlight, though, that was good work done by administration in finding a solution for more bathroom use in the downtown. I'm a big proponent of public washrooms, and I think that they've found a good solution, so I support this. Thank you.
Councillor Knodel.
Thank you, Mayor Clark, through the chair. So in reading this particular recommendation, the thoughts that went through my head were similar to Councillor Van Dyke's, but I started out weighing out long-term cost of having security downtown and monitoring and supporting those who are in need and using the existing washrooms, and how that would compare to the expense of building in town square. Then transition to the pragmatic mindset of, okay, we're at a point now where we aren't, as a community, spending as much time as what was planned in our town square, and also seeing the value of having security, not for more for connection, I would say. There is the bus terminal has lots of movement in many different ways through that space, and I do think that those who are vulnerable and at need can benefit from that connection, even if it's just casual or even if it's just eye contact. That is a positive thing. And those who are just down there doing their shopping can also benefit from that connection. So I see this as the best case scenario at this current time. And if future councils decide to evolve town square and the need for a washroom appears in the future, then that's a conversation for then. But I think this is a good plan for now.
Councillor Hirsch.
Sorry, the banker in me was just trying to whittle away the principal and the payments and stuff on savings of the 540,000. So essentially what you're looking at, and typically municipalities can do a 30-year repayment on these loans. So that would be $18,000 a year if you wanted to go 30 years repayment. And the interest would be around $21,600 every year, declining after that as you pay it down. So roughly at around 4%. So just to give a little illustration on what that would look like on an annual basis. So, sorry.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Councillor Hyder.
Thanks, Mayor Clark. I just would like to give some accolades to the staff that have been working on this, and it's a positive thing as the facility, we did increase security within the transit bathrooms, but it's a positive thing. I think I can agree with Councillor Knodel. It's more of a connection with different people that use the facility as well. The graffiti and things and vandalism have definitely decreased. So we're moving towards something better, and I think it's a good option.
Okay, thank you. When I look at the chart on page 54, I don't read that as residents living downtown and business owners downtown feeling like there are sufficient washroom facilities. So I certainly would anticipate additional information about that and potentially an additional washroom facility downtown. However, my question is, what is the future of Town Square? We're still calling it Town Square. I understand that we might still have events there, but it's also very possible that we will sell the property at some point. So my concern is, much like other projects in the past, we don't want to put in a bunch of infrastructure only to the next year or the year after that, demolish it, and that's kind of a waste of money. So I'm going to support this at this time, but from what I can see in the briefing note, it doesn't look like the bathroom issue is resolved. Councillor Van Dyke.
Yes, thank you through the chair. Just a little bit to your point there. I just had some questions for administration. Is it necessarily with this chart that there is insufficient or they're not aware of the existing facilities available? Because those are two different things, a perception versus reality. And secondly, I'm wondering if there is, I know in lots of industries, there's standards of service or expectations, for example, a certain number of public pools per 10,000 people in a community. Is there any kind of a standard for public washroom facilities within a certain radius and based on population that we can look to tell us what we should be providing as a community?
I think potentially some of those numbers might be have a relationship to the number of vulnerable people in your population as well, rather than just a per capita basis. But City Manager Mitchell, if you have awareness of something like that, please do answer.
Thank you, and through the chair to Councillor Van Dyke. On your first question there, I've actually only seen the results of the survey. I haven't seen the survey that actually went out, but Director Presteko is online, so she might be able to answer whether or not within the format of the survey, if the locations were presented to potential respondents.
So the chart does sort of outline it. My particular, what I kind of keyed in on, Councillor Van Dyke, was the saw evidence of outdoor washroom usage within the last month. So that would be presumably something that they witnessed, and not just a perception. However, who is doing the outdoor washroom usage is unknown. I think does that answer your question, Councillor Van Dyke? I'm just noting the time. Director Presteko, hello. We can't currently hear you. I apologize. She doesn't look muted, so we'll just, perhaps you can fill us in on that a different day. Thank you. All right, seeing no further speakers, we'll vote on the motion made by Councillor Hyder. That's unanimous. Final item is the addition by Councillor Sharps. Item 12.1, notice of motion. Councillor Sharps.
Yes, thank you so much. As we were enjoying the new year and going into Christmas, I was looking forward to, or enjoying Christmas and going into the new year, I was looking forward to this council and administration working together and getting some things done in our last 9 months. But one of the things that really stood out to me is why I'm making this motion. So I'm going to read it so everybody's aware. There's a few people that are. In the ruling on August 26, 2024, Justin Nation struck down the sanctions imposed by council, specifically sanctions 2, 3, 5, and 6. Sanction 1 was upheld. Section 4 was referred back to council for reconsideration. It's been 5 months without this issue appearing on the agenda. I'm putting forth this motion for council to prioritize this matter by placing it on the closed agenda in the near future for immediate deliberation. We frequently request administration perform various functions and reconsider decisions, and we always put timelines and ask for actions to be immediate. Our community has become frustrated with our inaction. I know there was no ill intention by anybody around this horseshoe, but it's gotten away from us. While we may not all agree with the code of conduct or Justin Nation's decision, it is our responsibility to address this matter. I hope to receive a second for this motion, and I trust the council will recognize the urgency of bringing this issue back for discussion.
Okay, so that's the notice of motion. So that notice will become a motion at our next meeting in open. And with that, we have no further business in open. We do have a couple of hours of business in closed, so if I could get a motion to go back to closed.
I will make that motion.
I'll second.
Thank you very much. We will take a brief 5-minute recess and start up again at 7:20.